All right. Hi, everyone. This is Jo Massaro with Yahweh Sisterhood Book Club. And I'm so excited that you're with us today. This is sort of an unexpected one we're doing, but it's such an important one, especially this time of the year. And I'm excited to have Amanda Huffman with us. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Now, you and I have a little bit of a history because we met at the virtual Speak Up conference this year.
Yep, we did.
And which was quite wonderful. I think there was like maybe 500 women. It was absolutely amazing. I've been to a couple of them when, they're in person, but this was obviously a year with COVID that a lot of things have changed. And, but it was wonderful. And one of the great things is that I put out this thing and I said, hey, if anybody would like to chat with me and talk about their book and or whatever is going on. And you were one of the people that said, hey, I'd like to do that. So I am excited that you're with us. Now, let me just share a little bit about Amanda. Now, I'm going to read a few sentences, but there's obviously so much more to your life. And we're going to learn some about that today. But so you're the creator of Women of the Military podcast. Okay. And you interview women who have served in the military or are currently serving in the military. And you also share certain aspects of your own military experience as an Air Force officer, military spouse, veteran, and mom. And let me just say thank you and your husband for your service.
Thank you.
You're also an author, a writer, a speaker. And if that's not enough, you're doing videos and interviews and just really reaching out to so many women. And I love that about what you do. So maybe you could show us a copy of your book.
I have it here. So my book is also titled Women of the Military. And this is me.
Oh, was it you? I wondered if it was. That's a great shot. Yep.
Yeah, my husband took this picture. So.
See, our husband's great.
Yeah. So yeah, this is 28 stories of women who've served in the military, primarily Air Force, because when I first got started, a lot of my connections were Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And so how did the idea of the book come about? And I know like you asked certain questions. There was obviously, you didn't just come up one day and say, I'm going to write a book.
Right. So in 2017, I participated in the Write 31 Days challenge, and I did deployment stories, and I wanted to interview people and share their deployment experiences. And I thought it was going to be mainly men who responded to my query for the deployment stories, but it actually was almost all women.
All women.
And so it was an eye-opening moment where I realized I'm a woman, I'm a veteran, I'm strategically place where I can talk to women about their experience and they want to talk about it. And so I said, I don't care about deployment anymore. I want to hear more of these stories of women. And so I was planning to repeat the series in 2018, but my husband's still in the Air Force and we moved from California to Virginia. And I felt really overwhelmed in September and getting ready for it in October. And it didn't work out. It was too stressful to write every day. Even though I had most of the interviews done, it was uploading, all the blogging stuff that goes into it. And so I decided not to participate, but I had all these stories, and that's when I put them together and made a book.
Yeah, I absolutely love the stories in there. I absolutely recommend you get the book, first of all, because I think I'm a civilian. I have not served. My family has served. I have two uncles that served in World War II, and they were actually POWs. I have, on my husband's side, his uncle served as well. And my sister joined the Army when she later in life. And so she joined and actually met somebody and got married while in the service. But, when I was growing up, when I was first married, Vietnam was going on. There's a little bug flying around. I think I have no idea where that came from. And he did not go because we were having a child at the time. That's how it was then. But I've always been such a patriotic person I love this country. As a matter of fact, I posted some pictures on my Facebook page the other day because we retired our old flag in front of our house and we put up a new one. And it was like such an emotional moment because, you know, we are blessed to be in this country. With all that's going on, we are still blessed to be this country. And a lot of people serve and have served for generation after generation to keep us where we are today. So, you know, when I say I appreciate your service, I so appreciate your service. And to everybody else that's out there who hears this, you know, if you or a family member have served, we just thank you from the bottom of our hearts. You didn't just wake up one day, I'm presuming either, then say, oh, I'm going to join the service. You want to kind of go back a little ways and tell us the story about that?
Yeah, so my senior year of high school was when September 11th happened, and before September 11th happened, I didn't know that the military really existed. I grew up in a small town in California and was kind of oblivious to the fact that the military was still in existence. I really thought that the military just popped up when there was a war and then they disappeared, and I didn't think a lot about that. And then September 11th happened, and in my history class, we learned a lot about the history of the military and what was going on, and they had all the news articles posted up in the front.
Yeah.
And it kind of opened my eyes to maybe I should look into the military. My parents suggested it, and I was like, no way. and then uh, I went to college, and I was at a community college, and it was odd. My freshman year of college, all my friends were either enlisting or doing an ROTC program, or someone was in the Guard and he was being activated to deploy to Afghanistan. So I had all these like military connections after having like no military connection my whole life. And then that freshman year, I just ended up being connected with all these people. And so then I guess peer pressure and then this little desire inside of me had me start looking into the military. And then I was going to enlist, but then I found out about ROTC, so I did that, which is an officer program. And when you graduate, you commission into the Air Force. And so that's what I did.
Well, my husband was in the Air Force, so he was quite excited when I told him about you. So let's kind of go back to something that you said, 9/11, because I think, you know, for somebody my age, you know, I look at it maybe a little differently than you do. Obviously, we both lived through a time in our country that was so devastating. I have a lot of family that live in New York, in the city, upstate as well. But you know, I was born in the Bronx. You know, there's so much history down there, and you know, there's a few things that I mean, I think we all remember where we were. I think that's one of the biggest things. I know that for me, I was living in New York, upstate at the time, and my husband and I would babysit a couple of our grandchildren, and all of a sudden we hear something on the news. And so that day and the whole day and the weeks afterwards, where you were just like you just sat in front of your TV.
Right. Yeah, I was in California, so the first plane had already hit because it was 6 a.m.
Yep.
ish when on California time. And so I remember waking up to my alarm clock, and instead of it being music, they were reporting about this attack. And I had just learned in history about how they had done this like fake radio thing when like radio was brand new. And so that's what I thought it was at first, because I was like, what, our country's being attacked by who? Like, I had no idea. And that was my first thought. I was like, maybe it's like the thing I learned about last night on my homework, that this isn't a real thing. And then I went down to have breakfast, and my mom was like, no, this is not made up, this is a real thing. And the whole day at school, we like watched the news. Like, we didn't do any schoolwork. It was just the TV was on.
Yep.
And everyone was just in shock of what was happening.
Yeah, and I think that that's a real good word to use, shock. Um, in this country, we have gone through wars. There's so many things that have happened, but it's not hit our
Right.
country in the way that it did. I was thinking about this morning that there are people that have been born that don't know what it is to have experienced what happened on 9/11.
Right.
And, you can watch documentaries, you can do all these other things, but it's kind of like the war. I remember my grandmother telling me, you don't know what it's like because you didn't live through the war and how terrible it was. And, you know, not only for, people that were fighting, but, at home as well. This, totally changed things in our country. I remember scrambling, trying to find phone numbers of my family members, and finally, calling and finally getting a hold of one of them, and they said, everybody's okay.
Right.
So, yeah. And so it definitely changed, I think, how we think of things. And one of the things I think we were going to talk about is what we can do to honor, those who had lost their lives. Um,
Yeah. I've been to the 9/11 memorial. They were still building the one tower when I went, but I think they did a really good job with that memorial in honoring people. They have everybody's name, and it's just like a solemn, beautiful place where you can go back and reflect and remember. And
Mhm.
I think they did a really good job. They also have one at the Pentagon, which I would like to go see. But I think taking time to pause and reflect and remember what happened and to think about the fact we're still at war today over that incident which happened 19 years ago, which is
Yes.
crazy.
Yeah, by the way, that's 2001, so it's 19 years. Somehow that doesn't even seem possible in my mind that
Right.
19 years have gone by. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about, you were deployed in Afghanistan, is that right? Maybe you could
Yes.
share a little bit. All right, so you're in school and kind of pick up on that and what happens after that.
So I deployed to Afghanistan in 2010. I commissioned into the Air Force in 2007, and I began my job as a civil engineer in New Mexico at Holloman Air Force Base. And so I was helping with the buildup and preparation for the F-22 that was coming to Holloman. And then I found out I was going to Afghanistan, and the Air Force likes to loan out officers to the Army because the Army engineers and the Air Force engineers are very different. And
Hmm.
so the Army needed the Air Force civil engineer skill set of being able to do like engineering projects. And so I deployed with the Army on a provincial reconstruction team. And we were in this little tiny province of Capisa, which is about the size of Rhode Island.
Hmm.
And the only it was that small, but it was really hard to like get around. We'd have to like go around mountains, so even though it was really tiny, it would take us a long time to go on all the different missions that we went on. And we would go out to the different construction projects that were going on and inspect them to make sure that the contractor was following the rules and meeting the standards that were in place, and meet with the local people and see Afghanistan. So that was our job.
So that was your job. What was your daily kind of life like? And, were there good parts, bad parts?
I mean, there were good parts. I made really good friends on the deployment, and we watched a lot of movies. There was a drive that had a bunch of movies, so we would watch movies. And there's a thing called Armed Forces Network, I think is what it's called,
Hmm.
AFN, and we would watch like this cake baking show every day, and whatever. There was only one channel, so it was whatever was on TV. But I remember like every afternoon we were watching like this show where they made these like crazy cakes. And but we would a typical day, it kind of depended. We would go on missions, which would mean like go off base and go and inspect the projects about once or twice a week, depending on how busy we were. And then the rest of the time we would be taking all the data we learned when we went on the missions and putting into the different computer programs that the military was tracking the progress. And then sometimes we would meet with contractors on the base And then other times we would have, there was a French component there, so sometimes we had meetings that were in French, Dari, which is the Afghan language of where we were at, and English. And I remember writing in my journal about like how much my head hurt and how little got done, because it was like first they'd say it in French, then they translate it into Dari, and then they translate it into English, and then someone would and it's just like,
Oh
how
my
did we
God.
get anything done? And so yeah, and so it was kind of just a lot of different moving pieces. I don't think any day was ever the same.
Mhm.
We always had different stuff going on, and sometimes we would go on longer missions, because when we went to like southern Afghanistan or Kapisa or northern Kapisa, we'd have to drive to Bagram, and then we'd spend the night, and then the next day we'd go out, and then we'd spend the night, and then we'd drive home, and same thing to go down south. So it was always changing, and it was an adventure. So
So was life different for you as a woman than it was for a man serving in Afghanistan?
I don't really feel like I was treated very differently.
Yeah.
We had two local national engineers who helped us. They went into a lot of the parts of Afghanistan, and they could go and see our projects more frequently because they didn't have to like have a whole convoy. And so they would tell us about the engineer I was with was also a female. And in Afghan culture, you have to have a baby after you get married within a year, or the wife is broken. And we were both married, and we both didn't have kids, and so they would continually remind us that we were broken. And so that was
Wow.
like, it was like an Afghan culture thing, and like we tried to explain birth control and like American culture, and they were like, no, it doesn't matter. They had birth control in Afghanistan, but you still had to have, you would like have a kid, prove that you're not broken, and then you could have birth control for like whatever amount of time before you had the next kid. So it was just really interesting, and that was all on base. And then off base, they had talked about wearing like the head covering, but people had talked about if you do that, then they'll see you as like an Afghan woman instead of an American woman. So we never wore the head covering, not out of disrespect, but because we wanted to be seen as equal with the men that we were talking to. And so when we did that, they kind of looked at American women as like a third sex. There was like men, American women, and then Afghan women, and they were treated very differently. So, I mean, occasionally they would say stuff like, one guy had 4 wives and like 20 kids or something crazy, and we were like, that's a lot of kids. And he said, American women are lazy. And just like they would say stuff like that, but for like getting the work done, it
Mhm.
was always like professional, because they knew they had to work with us to get paid. And so
Wow.
that was, yeah.
So you were broken if you did not have a child in the first year.
Yes, of
Wow.
marriage. Only the woman. It was always the woman's fault.
Right. It's always the woman's fault. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the front line. Were women always allowed to be on the front line, or did that change at some point in time?
So in 2016, women were allowed to serve in all jobs in the military. The way the Afghan, or I guess Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom, which is Iraq and Afghanistan, there's not really a front line. There's like, you go on missions and you drive from place to place, and with like IEDs hidden in the road or like surprise attacks, there's not like what you would learn about in World War II, where they had like trench warfare and they had a trench and a trench, and then they would fight. It was whenever you left the base, essentially you were on the front line. So it was a very gray area. And I couldn't serve in an infantry unit, but I was attached to an infantry unit. And so they use the words like attached, or I don't know any other word they use, but they would attach women to these like Navy SEAL units or to infantry units, because they needed women to interact with the population, the
Mhm.
women they couldn't get to. And so
Yep.
even though women technically weren't allowed to be in the infantry units or in various combat units, they were often attached to them and still serving. And that's why the law changed. It wasn't because the military had this great idea where they'd be equal opportunity. It was
Okay.
that women had been serving on the front lines pretty much since the war began, and it was just that now they were allowed to be in the combat roles, which were closed off to women, like infantry. It's a little Army, Marines, and all those have different rules. The Air Force was more open up to women because they could already fly combat missions, and so, but there were still some technical jobs that women couldn't do. But now, thankfully, all jobs are open to women.
Now, do you have young girls or, older people, older women that might come up to you or ask you, do you think it's a good idea to join the service? Or, I'm sure there's probably some questions.
Yeah, I actually created a girl's guide to the military to help young women who are considering joining the military, because it's something I'm really passionate about. When I joined the military, I think it changed my life. It opened doors and opportunities, like from when I was in, and then also as a veteran after I left. And so I feel like the military is a really great opportunity to help progress your life, and the benefits of education and the networking afterwards and all the veteran resources really are worth looking into.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big things, obviously, Vanessa Guillen was murdered this summer, and there's a big problem with sexual assault. And so that's one of the areas that I feel most passionate about, being proactive with women, because there were a lot of times where I was with a guy alone and I trusted him, and I was lucky because he was actually a good guy and he was worth trusting. But you never know, like,
Sure.
because the guy who's standing next to you is your brother, and so you trust all of them, and then you don't know that so sometimes, looking back, I was really lucky, and I want to make sure that women know, like, they need to it sucks, but you need to take extra precaution. You shouldn't be alone with a guy. You need to make sure that you take care of yourself. And so I think that's really important, because that is a problem within the military. And I think being an officer also protected me, because I know I was shielded, that the guys who were in the infantry unit were not allowed to talk to me when we were deployed, because they had gotten told, you're not allowed to talk to the lieutenants. And I think that protected me, and I didn't even know I was aware of that. So I think that's another thing, that officer and enlisted, I think in the enlisted ranks, it's even more rampant than in the officer ranks, because there's a layer of protection. So it's really important that we talk about that stuff up front to let people know, but I still think the benefits of the military outweigh the negative.
Okay. Why don't we talk a little bit about your Women of the Military, your podcast, and how all that started? Because I've been listening to some of them. Obviously, there's a lot there, so I haven't listened to them all, but they're really beautifully done, and a lot of great information. So share a little bit about that.
So the podcast idea kind of came with the book. When I decided not to do the series in October of 2018, I was like, oh, I have all these women's stories. I can just interview them and make a podcast. I don't know really why. Someone probably was like, hey, you should do a podcast. And then for some reason I was like, okay, I'll do it. And then I emailed all the women who were part of the book, and they were like, no, I've already told my story. I would rather keep it in written form. And so then I just started asking women veterans. I would go on LinkedIn and find women veteran and be like, do you want to be on my podcast? And then have them sign up. And so that was how it started. And I figured if I didn't get enough women to share their stories, I could read the stories that I had already collected and do. So instead of having it as a book, at first I had them saved in case I had them in audio format. But I ended up having so many women respond to my request to be on the podcast, and then it's kind of grown, and so now I have a list of women waiting to be on the podcast, and it's just been really cool I learned so much from each interview, and then it also really resonates with me as like a woman and a veteran in a way that I felt so alone before, and now I don't feel so alone.
Yeah. So why don't we take this moment and share about where people can connect with you and hear those podcasts, and any other places that you have that they can connect with you.
So my blog is airmantomom.com, and if you go on there, you can find the Women of the Military podcast. All the episodes are listed there. And then my podcast is Women of the Military, and you can find it on your favorite podcast app. Or if you don't like podcast apps, you can find it on the blog, and I have all the links with all the audio tracks, so you don't have to do that. And then I'm on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at Airman to Mom. And you can find my book on Amazon, Women of the Military.
Yeah, I'll just show you this. This is my book that just came out.
I love it.
It's the Book Lover's Companion, and it actually is just scheduling to start to be shipped this week. So if you are a book lover and love to keep a record of your books and all kinds of information about it, we had readers that gave us recipes that have stories with it as well. Really wonderful stories that are in there. I have my award-winning cheesecake recipe in there as well. So I encourage you to jump in and get yourselves a copy, and it makes a great gift as well. So, so you're married and your husband is still in the service.
Yep, he is.
But you got out of the service at some point in time.
Yeah, I got out when my first son was born about 7 years ago.
Okay. So what is it like for somebody coming out of the service and getting back into what might be the word normal, is there, but it's not really normal.
Right.
Maybe you could share a little bit about that experience and how it was.
Yeah, for me, it was really hard. I think a lot of veterans suffer with losing their identity and their purpose, because your identity and your purpose get wrapped up into being like we say, I'm an American airman, and I'm going to fight for my country. I can't actually remember what we actually said, but I know that's how it starts. And that losing the rank of being a captain in the Air Force and being a civil engineer, and I left to be a stay-at-home mom, and I just felt completely lost when I left the military. And I think shifting from being military member to military spouse was also really difficult, because unfortunately the military spouse community is kind of, I don't know if they're picked on, but people don't give them credit for all the hard things that they have to go through and they have to do. They say, oh, you're just there for the benefits. And there's some really negative stereotypes about military spouses. And even military spouses are really mean to themselves. And they're like, well, I don't do anything important. I'm not in the military. And it's like, I've done both. They're both really hard, and they're hard in different ways. And so it was a big shift to switch from being on active duty to being a stay-at-home mom and military spouse, and have my husband's career dictate where we're moving, and I didn't really matter anymore. But the identity piece, I've seen that through a lot of veterans struggling with what to do after they leave the military.
And so do you think that talking about a lot of these things in some of your podcasts and other things have really helped? I know that in my own life, talking about things, I'll talk about anything, talking about things to somebody else, especially in the situations, where you have been in so many other, individuals, it has to help. There has to be, is there like an organization that you guys belong to? You just form a group and start talking, or, what actually happens?
There are like a million, there's almost too many veteran organizations that make it a little overwhelming to step in. I've gotten involved in Women Veteran Interactive and Women Veteran Alliance because they are more niche down because they're for women. And so the topics they focus on are not like the typical veteran topics that come up, because they talk about like being a mom and like trying to balance life as a working mom and entrepreneurship and stuff like that. And there's also a lot of great smaller organization like Vets to Industry is a great one that helps veterans as they transition from being in the military to going into industry. And so there's plenty of great resources out there. It's just you have to find the right one that fits your personality. And the other part is sometimes you can go to a organization, especially as a woman, and maybe not feel welcomed, and that was the hard part for me, is I didn't feel welcomed. Even though I had never gone to a veteran organization, I didn't feel welcome because I didn't meet the stereotype of being a service member or a veteran. And so I think you can get stuck in thinking, well, I can't go to that because I don't meet the stereotype. But actually, the military is so diverse, and it's becoming more diverse, that there are more organizations, and even the traditional ones that people think of, like VFW and American Legion, are starting to be more of a diverse place instead of just one type of person.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question from a friend, Melody Jackson, and hopefully I have it right. Would you have done anything different than joining the military? Is there anything you might have done
instead of joining the military?
Instead of joining the military?
No, I don't think so. Once I found the military and found the Reserve Officer Training Program, I had plenty of opportunities to not actually join, but I just felt really passionate and drawn into joining the military that I can't even imagine my life without that experience. Especially, I met my husband doing ROTC, and then we've got to live in different parts of the country and make lots of different friends, and it's hard to imagine life without the military, which is kind of funny because I grew up in a small town, and like we just stayed in one place, and now we like move all over. So once I found out about the opportunity of the military, it was like nothing's gonna stop me from doing that.
That's awesome. So where do you see yourself, if you can answer this, maybe in 5 or 10 years? Where do you envision yourself?
So in 10 years, my husband should be out of the military, and I think life's going to look a lot different because we might actually live in one place for more than 4 years, and we'll have roots and friends and a network. And I want to, for the past, 7 years since I've gotten out of the military, it's always been focused on his career and his job, and I've been trying to build my business in like the cracks and the different places to make it all work. And so I see when my husband retires from the military that my business will take more of a leading role, and he'll get to be like not a stay-at-home dad, but the dad who's more there for the boys, especially because they'll be older and it'll be perfect timing for them. And so I'm hoping to become a speaker at more locations and to build my network and the podcast and write more books and lots of other stuff. So, yeah.
If there is a person in your life that has influenced you, who would that be?
So before I
say that.
So before I left for my deployment, my commander was Lieutenant Colonel Knudsen, and he spent time talking to me before I left for my deployment. He was a little worried about me, which, I would be a little worried about me. I was pretty shy and quiet, and I wasn't really sure if I was ready to deploy with the Army on like a combat mission. That's not really what I signed up for. And so he spent a lot of time in the like month between when I found out I was going and when I left, encouraging me, supporting me, and he gave me a notebook right before I left, and in it said, "When you come to a great chasm in life, jump. It isn't that far." And that quote has stuck with me through Afghanistan and then through the rest of my life, because in Afghanistan, I didn't have a choice. It was like, jump because the military is making you jump. But I always use that quote to be like, just do it. You can do it. And then I always found out it wasn't as big of a jump as I thought. And so I use that in my business a lot, and it's stuck with me my whole life.
That's beautiful. I love that. So I guess my last question would be, and then maybe if there's anything else we can talk about, would be, how has your faith impacted your life and what you do?
So I grew up in a Christian home, and I feel like I had a religion before I joined the military, but I didn't have a relationship. And when I was deployed to Afghanistan, we didn't have a chaplain, but I had a little daily devotion, and it was crazy how many times I would read the daily devotion at the end of the day, and it would line up perfectly with whatever I was struggling with or gave me comfort. And that was like the whole deployment. I had that little devotion that I read every day, and it just gave me the comfort. And then when I left the military and became a mom, and then my husband left for training for 8 weeks, and I had a little 2-month-old, and I realized I had to rely on God, and He really, I guess, made me not so prideful, humbled me, and made me realize that I needed to rely on Him and not myself. And so through those journeys of the military and like relying on him through the deployment, and then really needing him as I became a mom, it's just changed it from being like a religion to a relationship where I like have a relationship with God, and He really has an impact on my life and where I'm going.
I love that. I really do. I totally understand it. I often say that before I began to realize what it was to really have a relationship with Jesus, I was searching for love in all the wrong
Right.
places. And I'm so grateful today that Jesus is the center of my life. So, anything else you want to share? Anything? How are your kids doing? I guess, how old are they? How's the family doing?
They're 7 and 4, and we decided this year to do homeschooling because the virtual option didn't give me the flexibility that I needed to be able to run a business. So that's been a new adventure, but actually it's been a lot of fun. I I technically I'm not thankful that COVID happened, but there are a lot of good things that I realized. My son was going to school. He would leave at 8:45 and get on the bus and then get home at like 4:15, and I didn't realize how much I missed my oldest, and I have got to play with them more. I've got to spend a lot of time with them, and it's been such a blessing. And I never would have considered homeschooling,
Mhm.
but the more that I look into it and the more that we've been doing it about a month, I realize there's so much flexibility, and it's really been a lot of fun to go exploring and just do all the fun stuff that they love to do and get to play with them.
Yeah, let me just say, for somebody who has raised 4 children, who now has 8 grandchildren, and they are graduating from either high school in the next year or college. We just had 2 graduate from high school and 1 from college in June. Enjoy every moment you can, because before you know it, time goes by so quickly, and they are all grown up. And whenever I see little kids, it's like I just, love those days when my kids were young. And but I didn't know then what I know now, obviously, and I wish
Yeah.
that I had. Yeah. Okay. So we want to put your book up there again so
Oh
people can
yeah.
see it. I love that cover, Women of the Military.
Yeah,
Uh,
and this picture is the podcast picture too. So
Yes, it is. Yep. So you'll be able to find it. It'll be familiar. Make sure you listen. That's the great thing about podcasts. You can listen to them anytime.
yeah,
Um, I just want to again say thank you so much. And please, what's your husband's first name?
Michael,
Michael. Please tell Michael we appreciate him and his service.
I
And
will.
we certainly appreciate you and your service and all that you do, because there's a lot you still have to do um, with a spouse being in the service as well. So, but you're still in. You're just,
Right.
you know, not out there right now. So,
Yeah.
anyway, we love you and we appreciate you, and thank you for being on Yahweh Sisterhood Book Club. And we will be looking forward to a whole bunch of interviews that are coming up. We have, I think, 4 more women from the Speak Up Conference that I'm going to be talking to. One is next Friday, I believe. So we're hitting a lot of different topics. We're hitting human trafficking. We are hitting abortion and some other issues along the way in the next month. So we look forward to seeing you guys again. Blessings to you and Amanda Huffman. You are a doll. Thank you so much for everything that you have done to serve. And we just really do appreciate you. God bless you.